My name is Arto Kallioniemi, and I'm this four persons colleague from the University of Helsinki. And I have given each of you this booklet, which name is Research-Based Teaching at the Head of Teachers' Education, which shows very well out what kind of teachers' education system we have in Finland. But now I give you a little overview about Jari's presentation about Finland, Finnish school system, and how the education happens in Finland. As you know, because I also heard that there will become some teachers from school, and there are teachers who are coming to see your school tomorrow, and I'm not so sure how much information you have about Finland, and I decided that I say a little bit about Finland. Finland is located at the northern part of Europe, and we have had an independent country since 1917. And in 1995 we get a very big change in the Finnish society because we become as a member of EU, and it says a lot about because we have been very isolated country in Northern Europe, and when we become as a members of EU, it means that all doors open to Europe. And we are a very little country. The amount of Finnish people, our population is 5.3 million, and usually the most of people are located at Helsinki, the capital area, to the south part of Finland. In the northern part of Finland there are many places where are nowadays very empty, and that is also a very big challenge for education. We have had very different kind of distance education programs there. Then we have we are bilingual country, which means that we have two official languages, which are Finnish and Swedish, and then we are very monocultural country, which means that in Finland we have been very homogeneous by our background. We have had very low rate of immigrants and people from abroad in Finland. And we have because I know that the religion is very hidden in USA, but I have heard that it has a very big role in politics. In Finland we are Protestants, and the majority of people are Lutheran. And then we have compulsory education for children from 7 to 16, and our capital is Helsinki. And here some main cornerstone about Finnish education policy. The following themes can be found in policy documents and educational publications since last 20 years. First, we have developed very much Finnish education, and we have very common, consistent, long-term policy. And the basic models of our comprehensive school and also our teachers' education are nowadays 40 years old. And the idea of all education in Finland is to support the development of broad, full literacy, which means that we have a very much different kind of subject in schools. For example, we have a very large language programs in school because we are so isolated country, and all Finnish children must learn both these Finnish, Swedish, and then they have English or some other languages, and usually they have 4 languages. The students usually have 4, or some have 5 languages, and the languages take a lot about our curriculum. Then we have the idea of educational equality, because we have been in history we have been as a social welfare country, and we have had a very good idea that education for everybody. Then we have compulsory education is free of charge to all, including books, meals, transport, and healthcare. And we have not we have not private sector in education. Almost all schools, we have 98% of schools are public founded and public owner. We have some private schools, but they usually get the money from the state. And it also means that we have not that that kind of system of magnet schools as in some other countries. Usually children go, they get their education in the nearest school, and then we have also very well organized special education system, and nowadays we have integrated the special education in many places to the normal education. Then we have the evolution of decision power to the local level, which means that the headmaster is at school a pedagogical director, and also the local authorities together with the teachers plan local curricula, organize general assessment, and use this data for evaluating the school and that kind of things. Then we have a very big culture of trust, which means that we have no inspecting system. As you know, many countries, there are a lot of inspectors who are looking to school and looking what the teachers really do there and want to look at that are teachers in the right way and that kind of things. We have no inspecting system in Finland. Then in a comprehensive level, we have no national exams, and then we have no private tutoring or grammar schools. And Finnish school system guarantees equal learning opportunities regardless of social background, and this is also a very important thing. The focus in many countries, there are a lot of assessments, and students are comparing all the time. The focus in Finland is supporting and guiding children, and very few children need to be a repeat a year. It's very seldom in the Finnish school. And then Finnish teachers are very high educated professionals, as Lena told you, and in the morning. And we get our teachers' education is very high academic level, and it also means that teachers' profession is very appreciated in the Finnish society. We have each year much more candidates who want to become as a teacher. That we have last year we have almost 1,000 candidates, and we take 120 to our primary school.
We have 3,000 candidates. 3,000.
Siis 300.
3,000.
3,000 candidates, and we take only 120 to our teachers' education. It is very hard to get a place for primary teachers' education, especially in the Helsinki area. And there you see the educational system of Finland, and you see that we have a very high school the age when children begin the school. We have the compulsory education begin when the children are 7 years old, and we have 9 years old comprehensive school for all children. Before that, children can get 1 year's education in preschool, pre-primary education, it's preschool education, and it is not. It is so that all 6 years old children's right to get this preschool education. And then we have this basic education, and after basic education we have two possibilities for young persons. The one is that they come to general upper secondary school, and the other is that they get the vocational education. Before it was so that the 60% or maybe over 60% of students go to this senior secondary school, but nowadays also vocational school is also very popular among Finnish teenagers and young persons. And both these schools get also an opportunity to continue studies. We have that kind of polytechnical schools, and then we have these universities. And you can also from polytechnical school go to universities. And our system is also so that if you miss something, if you don't pass this basic education, although we try that every children pass it, but there are some children who don't pass it. They can go back after many years and continue their studies. You can in all levels of this education system, you can continue your education. It is very amazing idea, and we have opened that kind of possibilities in Finnish societies. And that was, and I also say that our culture respects and promotes a lot of learning. All Finnish teachers are treating like professionals, like lawyers and medical doctors, and also the homes and also the culture trust a lot of to school. And in some Finnish paper, it was given research at what are the most popular occupations for wife and husband. And you see that the women appreciated teachers as a trade, and the men appreciated teacher the most one. They were all Finnish persons want to take men want to have a teacher as their wife. This tells us that the teachers are something very special in Finnish society, and they are very high appreciated. And school usually trust a lot of the school, and also respect the school. Family and parents look at children that they want that they pass the school. Yeah, and now I have.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
excuse me. Is this what they think about these professions, or are these the professions they enter?
I think what they think about
What
this.
they think, okay.
It's what they want their
What they want their
spouse to
partner
do.
to be.
Yeah.
Oh, what they want their partner to do.
Yeah,
Right,
Yes.
and the women don't want their spouse to be a researcher.
Yeah. But this also tells something about teachers' professions appreciated in Finnish society. Yeah, thank you.
So I will have a look for assessment in Finnish schools from the point of view of two projects I have been leading. One is about design-based research project where we have been designing an assessment tool supporting teachers' assessment practices. And another I was in charge was a national monitoring in science. What is the level of competence in science in the end of comprehensive school? In addition to me, there are two colleagues of mine. Heidi Kryvatsky, some of you have met her when you were visiting Finland. She has been in both projects. And Laura Koistinen, when she was a Koistinen, now she's in Lena's project and not
She's
anymore Salo nowadays. So she has been collaborating with me in these two projects. I will say something about the policy issues Arto already mentioned, but I try to underline some aspects from the point of view of assessment. Then the quality is an important issue. You have this outcome-based thinking here in US, and I think the main idea is that it is the way how to support quality in US schools. So I say something about our quality culture. And then I go shortly through those two projects, and then the final slide is a kind of discussion and my idea what is you might learn from Finnish experience and somehow reflect on that. So this is similar what Arto already mentioned. The equality is the main issue in our education, and there are some statistics. It's easy to find from the OECD webpage. In all PISA research, there has been a school questionnaire where the opinions of headmasters or teachers have been asked. Maybe this is one of the interesting from the point of view of assessment. In Finland, it's in our law that it's illegal to group students according to their abilities. However, there are some minor grouping of students. The headmasters who were answering this question, I think that in 64% of the schools say that they are not grouping students in any situations during the comprehensive school from grades 1 to 9. So in some schools, some kind of grouping is done. In OECD countries, only 33, this green is OECD average. So it's very common, quite common in OECD countries. So this means that Finnish classrooms are really heterogeneous. There are different kind of learners in the same classroom. And this makes also challenges for assessment. Actually, teachers are using different kind of assignments, different kind of tasks for different students, but they are also using different kind of assessment tools for different students. So they are not harmonized. And the formative assessment is very encouraging and supportive. So this is one issue you should remember when I'm describing Finnish assessment. We are not looking for standardization in assessment. This was also Arto already discussing about the decision making at the local level and culture of trust. According to PISA questionnaire, 65% of the headmasters think that they have real power in making the school budget, how to allocate the money. In many cities, big cities, the city director of education in the city, they participate in thinking how the budget will be allocated. But this is quite interesting that almost 100% of the teachers think that they are really responsible for making the curriculum, the disciplinary policy, and assessment policy. And in OECD it's about 77. So this is the context where we are living. Quality. How we are looking quality? We are not having inspectors or national exams, but how we are able to raise the quality in education. You can easily find from the literature opinions that the quality and quality work, quality assurance, it should be as low level as possible, because then it is possible to master changes, and it's also possible to feel ownership to education. You are really owner of the education if you are in charge for quality. And Ehlers writes quite nicely that in education we need methods and practices that get deeper into organization and closer to the teachers and learners. So there are support for Finnish ideas in literature in general. However, the quality work is not only done at school level. There are levels in our quality control or quality assurance system. The national level we have a framework, and in Finnish framework curriculum, as I mentioned, there are some 5 pages for each school subject, some general guidelines, the aims. And we are doing national level monitorings. My second project is about monitoring in science. The most important in education is the municipality level. They are collecting the tax money and they have to decide how to use the tax money for education, healthcare and social care. They are organizing meetings with headmasters. The municipalities should also monitor how it's going on with different schools. And they have developed this kind of idea of positive discrimination. If they recognize that some schools have difficulties, then they are putting more money to those schools. There are different kind of feedback systems. Opinions are collected through the web page and so on. And at school level, there are different kind of processes going on, mainly based on self-assessment and discussions. Parents meetings, and these kinds of triangle meetings where a parent, a student and a teacher are meeting together and discussing about the student learning and his or her outcomes. And teachers also meet headmaster in the development discussions, and it's based on the first the teacher is making kind of self-assessment where I am now, what I have done, and then he or she goes to the headmaster's office and discuss. I am organizing this kind of development discussions to Arto and Leena, and it's a way how I support my colleagues for self-reflection. And I am having my own discussion with the dean. Of course, there must be interaction between the levels. We have meetings, we have discussions, and we are eager to share opinions between the levels. Actually, we don't like the term quality assurance or quality control. We like to call it quality culture. It allows freedom. It is based on certain level of trust. It's based on self-assessment. Each partner or levels take responsibility seriously. It's a part of professionalism. During the lunch break, I mentioned that we were very eager to have Auli as a pedagogical lecture at our faculty. And at least I was thinking that it's a way how to get feedback of our own activities. So it's a part of, in my point of view, it's a part of our quality culture. There must be interaction between the levels and different kind of self-evaluations are done frequently. I don't know if you like this slide, but this is my way, how I understand the two main approaches, the outcome-based approach and I call Finnish approach the input approach. So we just described shortly in few pages the big aims for education. And you are describing what is the outcome, what should be learned, detailed. And this is the description I have done for myself to understand the differences. So my point of view, this outcome, it has the roots in behaviorism. It's my opinion. So the Margerian ideas and old-fashioned industrial ideas that you are looking at the output. If it is good, you accept it. If it is bad, you throw it away or punish. In our input model, we are just giving the broad aims, and then we are organizing this kind of self-assessment and supportive assessment, and we see that it is way to improve. It's assessment is for improvements. You have, or UK, they have a national level assessment. We have assessment at the level of school and classroom, the teacher or classroom-based assessment. There's the focus is mainly, not mainly, but in some level to product. In our approach, the process is the most interesting, how to support learning processes. Of course, the product is important, and especially in the end of comprehensive school, it is also important to know in what level students are, and there should be also some there should be possibility to compare the students, because the selection to the upper secondary school, high school, or other places is based on the assessment at the comprehensive school. I understand it's very important in outcome-based model that there are descriptions, what you should learn. It's good for learners to know what should be learned, good for teachers to know what should be learned. And it is also, if you are organizing a national level assessment, it is a good basis for designing the items for the assessment. When we were organizing the monitoring, it was very difficult to design items because we were not having detailed descriptions of outcomes. In our model, it's the aims, it's a place for co-planning, so they are creating the place for co-planning and teacher-conducted assessment for enhancing the learning processes. Of course, there are negative sides involved. In outcome-based approach, it's a possibility of neglection of the teaching and learning as a process. It creates a competitive culture, and teachers are teaching to the test. We all know that teachers are teaching to the test if there are this kind of national level testing. In our approach, it could be problematic to discuss about the quality of teaching and learning outcomes. The comparison, it's not fair because every teacher might assess in a different way. And the grading is also based on the teachers. So my second example gives you some light how well this is working from the point of view of comparison. Are the teachers doing the assessment in a fair way? And this is my first case, an assessment tool for Finnish science education. So my background is in science, so my examples are from the science education. So some years ago, there were common discussion that there must be more diversity in assessment, and that's why we started a project where we were designing a tool, a web-based tool for supporting teachers to make the assessment more diverse and use different kind of tools in assessment. I have already mentioned that teachers are the main actors in assessment. Formative and informal assessment are the most important, especially in comprehensive school level. High school level, it's more formal. And I'm now talking mainly from the comprehensive school point of view. In Finland, there are challenges to support teachers in use of educational technology. That was our aim also through this assessment tool, to support teachers to use more technology in education. The overall aim of the project was that the concrete outcome should be an online, web-based environment supporting teachers in assessment and added value for using technology. From a research point of view, we were interested about the assessment practices. What kind of practices teachers were having, how they are doing it, what are the aims in their mind, who are using the assessment data in Finland. So to know more about assessment practices. It's not mentioned here, but of course we are researchers and we have also researchers. So these are the practical aims of the project. The design-based research, it's coming from the United States. The design-based research collective have been working and publishing the guidelines, and there are a lot of papers in that field. It's an iterative process. You are designing something, then you are collecting data, analyzing. You learn more about the phenomena you are researching, and then you next cycle and so on. And researchers are blamed in Europe at least, and in Finland also, that researchers are doing something and school is living somewhere, and how to meet the researchers and schools, how the school benefit from research. So in this kind of approach, typically comes some useful artifact from the project. And this educational knowledge is of course important for more intellectual praxis. The literature review, or in some papers it's called theoretical problem analysis. We have done it, learning about assessment in general. And then we become familiar with teachers' practices, and my data is about this. We interviewed 20 teachers, different kind of teachers, and partly stimulated the interview with the prototype of assessment tool. And the evaluation of a ready artifact is not done yet. It will be done hopefully this year or beginning of next year. This is something I already mentioned, that in the literature there are this kind of ideas that we should have shift in educational assessment towards internal teacher productive procedures, formative forms of assessment, and there are literature of those different kind of possibilities in assessment, purposes of doing assessment, and changes in assessment practices. This is part of the literature review for theoretical problem analysis. There are several dilemmas in assessment. The assessment is supporting student learning. It's also one way how to monitor the quality of education system. So how the assessment is able to serve all the diverse functions of it has. There's a strong tension between internal and external assessment. Nature of use assessment data, what, how, who, when, why. A challenge to make changes in assessment, and teachers' beliefs about assessment practices, assessment tools, and use of technology. The teachers' beliefs should be taken into account when something is designed, at least from my opinion. So 22 teachers were interviewed. They were mainly physics, math teachers, some English, some biology teachers, primary teachers, even preschool teachers. And then we have a thematic interview. We have the themes, we were asking them, and then we did a traditional content analysis of the interview data. This is the outcome of the analysis. So there were 5 themes that were coming out from the interview data. The first idea is that the assessment, it's a part of professional development, especially when the teachers are looking at students' outcomes. So they start thinking what they have done because this is the outcome. We are willing to use the term usability. It's the quality term describing when you are using a tool, how easy, how nice it is to achieve the aims, what is the purpose of using the tool. It is coming from the engineering science, but it's also widely used in educational science. So the technical properties of the available resources, that comes out from the interviews. The pedagogical usability, how well these tools are supporting the pedagogical purposes. Different forms of assessment comes out from the interviews. There are huge diversity how teachers are conducting assessment. And then special features dealing with science, dealing with language education. For example, in English language they are using the audio tapes. In science it's very nice to use the video tapes in assessment and so on. Okay, some detail. So teachers' autonomous role as a conductor of assessment, it comes very clear from the data. Everybody feels that we are in charge, as it is in the PISA school question data. And many teachers, not all, but many, were thinking that it provides a starting point for reflection on the quality of teaching. So they were thinking how they have done their work and what students have learned from the instruction. We have to understand reasons behind the results. This is a direct quotation. In the engineering science, the usability, we are then thinking that how learnability, what is the learnability of the artifact, what is the understandability, operability and attractiveness of the tool. So these kind of things come out, but not exactly as in engineering science, but in some level. So teachers value technology which is convenient and easy to use. The learnability of the tool should be very easy. And actually, the first prototype we were developing a long time, it was not at all easy to learn. So quite recently we decided to skip to develop own tool because we were not able to make it so that teachers are able to learn to use it easily. I will explain what is our solution now, and we are quite happy. It should be easy to use. It should have added value to assessment, diversity in assessment, quality, context, and also to add the videos and audio files. So let's go. The pedagogical usability, because in Finland every teacher decides themselves how they teach and what they teach. They have the high variation. And then they are also assessing according to what they have taught. So they think that what they assess, that it must fit well what they have been teaching. So the tool should offer flexibility. The type of items should be, there should be variation with the type of items, the context, and so on. Teachers are typically making the test themselves, but they are sometimes taking some ready questions from the textbooks or some resources available for teachers. Different forms of assessment. Every teacher is not using all the forms. But if you are interviewing 20 teachers, the high variation of forms they are using. It is teacher conducted, it is continuous, multiple elements, feedback to both students and teacher, and self-assessment. Self-assessment is important in assessment. The student, and you should guide students in their own self-assessment activities. Somebody were thinking that you do not need any formal assessment. You can see from their classroom activities where they are. That's enough for me. And then I have this also already mentioned that in science, the science inquiry is important. How to include characteristics of inquiry orientation to the assessment items. And also the potentials for using technology is important in science. This is the summary of the interviews, various needs, easy to learn, pedagogical issues should be considered, and diversity between teachers. But they have willingness to try and use new innovations and need for modifying the current practices. This was also very clear in the interviews. So I mentioned that our prototype was not working as we were willing. Teachers were not, it was not easy to learn to use it. And now our idea is we recognize that the US platform, D2L, it's a US platform so for schools. It's actually quite nice platform. You have to have some own work, you have to modify it, but it's a good platform for making what we were looking with our own programming. And now we have started to use the D2L, and there's one publishing company, they have adopted it and starting to use it also for other purposes in the field of education. So there are already places for self-assessment, and there are also already tools for generating items and making the online tests. And it is also possible to collect some kind of data bank about the learning outcomes in different schools, and it is possible for teachers to compare his or her own students' outcomes to some kind of national average, which is all some kind accumulating in the system. So we are very optimistic that this tool is very well working with this purpose we need. But it was pity that our own work it was not possible to make ready. But this is fine from United States, but it as not as such, but somehow customized for Finnish purposes. And the other case is the national monitoring in science. The aim of the monitoring was that the National Board of Education, which is responsible for making the national framework curriculum and also responsible for making the monitoring, they according to the agreement they have with the ministry, they should know at some level how well the students have achieved the aims mentioned in the national framework curriculum. In science it was organized last year, the previous was 2001, so it is not so frequently done, sometimes. And it looks that it's enough. And it's done at the end of compulsory education, a representative sample. It's about more than 5% of the age cohort, and it's paper and pencil test because of the financial and economical reason. And in addition to this competence test, there were also items measuring the attitudes and how the students feel, what kind of teaching methods, assessment methods are used at school. So we are not having, as such, ready framework for making the items for national level assessment. So we adopt the taxonomy of Anderson and Radboll. It looks nice that there are the knowledge dimension and the cognitive process dimension, and then is the content dimension. And then we were designing items based on that taxonomy. In the original taxonomy, there are 6-point level in the cognitive process dimension and 4 in the knowledge dimension. But based on the literature review, it's very clear that it's quite difficult to design items, especially in the cognitive process dimension. So we reduce the dimension for measuring, remembering, understanding, apply, and creating. So this was a kind of compromise of the taxonomy. The knowledge dimension, shortly here, we make the items factual knowledge, conceptual and procedural knowledge. And conceptual knowledge was measuring the knowledge of science, the knowledge about science, especially the knowledge about inquiry and explanations. And the procedural knowledge dimension was measuring knowledge related to science process skills and integrated science process skills. We had mainly the multiple choice, true, false, matching, short answer questions. There were a lot of text and pictures in the items, tables and graphs. And for economical reasons, the most of the test items were in those objective items. This is short the procedure. First the framework, then item design about double in the beginning, and in the final half of the original items we organize a pretest, and then we make some analysis, some rash analysis, and have a look how the items were working. And then we organize the main test, analysis, reporting. And what is the most important in this kind of monitoring is the information to teachers. So the results were reported in teacher magazines. A lot of meetings were organized for teachers, and the results were communicated to them. It's also important for the national policy, and the new national framework curriculum is just started to generate. So every 10th year we are making the new national frame, and now it has an impact to that work. The results, the summary is public, but there is no information about the schools or things like that available. This is an example of the test item, rather traditional. One item is measuring here remembering, and others are some level measuring understanding, and it's measuring conceptual knowledge about the batteries and things like that. And in addition to this type of cognitive items, we measure also the self-efficacy, because and attitudes and environmental attitudes. It's important to know something about the correlations between self-efficacy and attitudes and cognitive outcomes. We try to have at about half of the items, this kind of items measuring in some level the procedural knowledge, because the inquiry is important in science. So this is the short story, a picture, some information available dealing with the experiment, and then the items are measuring how able students are interpret the outcomes of the experiment. The coding is quite close to PISA coding. So if you have only one correct, you get 0, and so on. So it's not 1 point per each correct. This is quite complex item. It's a computational item. Students should understand the physical law and make some kind of algebra computation, and then this is measured also by these true-false items. And this is an example of the text, a story about Joule, how he was experimenting, and then what did Joule measure and what did he conclude. So there's a variation between the items. Outcomes, I think this is the most amazing outcome. The teacher grading, correlation between teacher grading and the national monitoring is very high. So although we have this high diversity in assessment, still in the national monitoring, we recognize, through that monitoring we recognize that teachers' grading is very fair. And actually it is possible to compare. So we have some level succeeded in educating teachers to be supportive, at least during the studies, but in the end of compulsory school, comprehensive school, they are also thinking this comparison of students. Typically students solve 60% of the items, and it doesn't matter if you are looking for conceptual knowledge or procedural knowledge, and even the items measuring memorizing, understanding and applying, it's quite equal. Of course the applying is more challenging. There were gender differences. Boys were better in physics, girls in biology. Some minor differences between the areas southwest, east, south, north, east, west. But the serious difference was in the language background. We have two official languages in Finland. Swedish and Finnish are official languages. The Swedish-speaking people performed not so well compared to Finnish-speaking. There were interesting correlations and some attitude outcomes. Environmental attitudes are positive, biology, geography positive, physics and chemistry negative, and gender difference. Actually, anything new is very common, but this comes out and this was communicated to teachers. Science-related self-efficacy and learning outcomes. In teacher education, at least I am discussing a lot about the self-efficacy, and this is one way how we support student teachers to understand why it is actually quite nice to have a heterogeneous classroom. In a heterogeneous classroom, the high-performing students are kind of role models for low-performing. And then if you are supporting the student collaboration, then the high and low-performing students can collaborate and learn from each other. So it's actually the optimal situation for the development of self-efficacy. Also the co-planning and this kind of encouraging assessment is important for self-efficacy. And we all know that the self-efficacy is in the individual level, it explains the most of the performance. It's also in the PISA data. You can see that the self-efficacy explains the most of the outcome in PISA. The number of practical work per week and learning outcomes, they have a positive correlation. And how often teacher takes into account student ideas, that is also positive. There have a lot of positive correlation, but some interesting here. Okay, my final slides, what we can learn. So very simple summary. In assessment, we need more collaboration, less competition, more equal opportunities for all learners. This means supportive assessment. And then we need less similar assessment protocol and rankings. We need more decision making and assessment at local level. We need less standardization and national testing. We need more trust-based responsibility, less test-based accountability. Formative and encouraging assessment we need more, and less summative and punishment type of assessment. We need more professionalism in assessment and less bureaucracy in assessment. Thank you.
I'm curious about the point where they choose whether they go sort of the vocational polytechnic route or the university route.
Mm-hmm.
Do they get examined at any point? Can anybody choose either route? How does that work?
So when the students are 16 years old, they have to decide if they take more vocational orientation or academic orientation, high school. In Finland it's about 50-50. About half takes the other and half takes another. In Finland the vocational school, we are not calling them anymore vocational schools, but anyway, that line, it has a very positive connotation, and parents appreciate highly this road also. They can see that you get a nice job, nice salary, good career, and they are also having the academic disciplines in the vocational side, so there are English, mathematics, mother language, and there are no bottom ends. If you decide in the early life this vocational, you are able to come back to university also. So we avoid the bottleneck, so it's open all the time. If you remember the bigger article demonstrate us, there were lines
Yeah.
crossing the
I just wondered,
place.
there's no exams for them to get into university or anything into the more academic route?
So, okay, let me go. So for the high school, the students are selected based on the gradings they have in comprehensive school. And then again, when they apply to the polytechnics or universities or vocational, every educational establishment, they can decide themselves how to select. So it could be based on the gradings in the previous level, but it's quite common to have also tests. For example, Arto mentioned that primary school teacher education, we select from 3,000, we select 100. And there is one reading comprehension test based on one book, published 1 month before the test, and then interviews. The physics department, they are organizing the test in physics. So there are variations, but there are tests or ratings that are used for selection. In Finland, as we explained that equality is important, that means that everything is free. The comprehensive school is totally free, even the school books are free and meals. The high school is free, but you have to buy books. The university is free, master programs and PhD programs, they are free. You are not paying anything. The books, maybe you can go to the library, and so that is the policy that everything should be free. But that means that we have to select. We are not able to take everybody.
Could I just ask, I think you shared on the national monitoring for science.
Yeah.
Do you for other subjects?
Yeah. The most common is in mathematics and mother language. They are organized almost every second or every third year.
Oh, every.
But also in history and social science, in arts, in handicraft, art, music. In almost every subject we are having monitorings.
And you
Not frequently.
Okay, I may not have catch it correctly. I think you mentioned something about 5 students. Was that the sample size per school or?
The sample size, so we have about
5%.
5%, yeah, 5%. So it's the cohort is about 60,000 students and about 3,000, 5,000. It depends a lot.
And the selection is done by.
It is very similar as in the PISA.
Yeah.
So we are. It's the sample is. Okay, it's a school-based sample, but the bigger schools have the bigger probability to be selected. So it's somehow linked with the number of students in the school.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the students are selected at school. But it's first the schools and the students.
So your union sampling is actually the school.
Sorry?
Your union sampling is school.
First schools. It's very similar as in PISA.
Okay.
But it's the probability to be selected depends on the number of students at school.
Yeah, I was wondering, a lot of your assessment, I believe, is done by teachers at the local level. So since your field is in science, I was wondering if you might talk a little bit about the kind of formative and summative assessments that teachers would create in science at the upper secondary schools.
So we have courses. The science is divided to courses. So one course is about 36 lesson hours. And typically in the end of this course, there is a summative test. But during the studies, the teacher is organizing different kind of other type of assessment. Small formative tests, diagnostic tests are important in science to know what are the students' conceptions before teaching. And this also informal assessment is very important. Teachers are typically walking around the classroom, supporting student learning, and this is the way how they know, as the teacher write in the open answer that or interview that I know when I'm walking there discussing with students what they know, what they do not know. So it's enough for me. So this kind of formative, informal, it's important part. But maybe some teachers are not having those summative, because it's not necessary to have. The teacher can decide. But it's quite common to have a test in the end of the. But is your.
Yes, that was what I was asking about.
And we have teacher manuals in science and in many other subjects, and there are already kind of collections for summative and formative assessment and diagnostic assessment. And this web-based tool was one step forwards to have online tests and different kind of more versatile tools for assessing students' learning and monitoring how it's going. Yeah.
But those
And then they're admitted based upon the grades.
Yeah. Yeah.
And some schools are more restrictive than others. So
That's
for
that's
instance,
correct. Yeah. Yeah.
A
Yeah.
principal said to me, well, the lowest average that
Yeah.
we accepted was
That's correct,
9.2 and somebody else 7.6.
It's a competition. Yeah.
So it is competitive, but
Yeah.
what grades are we talking about? Just the summative grades from 7, 8, and 9?
The final grading.
Just
the
the
teacher
final
teacher have to make a final grading and take into account the whole lower secondary, the grade 7, 8, 9,
7, 8, and 9.
and make the final grading based on the information. And all the gradings we have in the national framework curriculum, and even in the law, in the Finnish law, it is said that it's illegal to give the grades based on the summative assessment. You should use versatile. It is said in a law even. It's quite
So here's what I can't understand. If there's no standardized testing, then there's a high degree of confidence in that number. I mean, somebody gets in with a 9.2, somebody doesn't get in with a 9.1.
Yeah.
How, and so there's
This is-
confidence that there's a difference between somebody getting 9.2 and
Yeah.
somebody getting 9.1, even though there's no standardized test.
Of course, this kind of speculation all the time is that the grades which are coming from these schools, are they the same grades which are
Yes,
coming from?
that's
But
my
as you can
guess,
see, the
that's my-
correlation between the teacher grading and monitoring, it's very high.
Yes,
It's
you
quite
might-
close. And you know that if a student is participating in a national test, for some reasons maybe he is or she is not in the level he or she should be. Also could be mistakes in the national gradings. Everywhere we have the errors in assessment. But it's quite well working in our society, and teachers know that high school teachers are blaming those teachers who are giving the wrong grades. So the feedback between the schools. So this kind
And
of
it goes back to the idea of trust as well.
trust.
There's a lot of trust.
It's a lot of trust. Yeah.
I want to, are you going to push further on, because I think this issue of grading is really a fascinating one. Do you want
Well, I
to?
wanted to talk a little bit more about performance-based assessment versus the kinds that you're showing us, which are pencil and pen or paper tests that are affordable. But you look at the cognitive domain; it's a little easier to
Yeah, it's very
do those. And now we're talking about more affective domains in assessments and the difficulty in measuring that. So what do we do about that? Because I know my colleagues here from the school district are looking at more performance-based assessments, and in your terms are so short, and even the teachers we talked to said, we don't do big projects, it takes too long, we don't have that kind of time. So
Yeah.
how do we work around that?
So the projects are important, and teachers should take into account the outcomes of the projects, yes. It's one part of the grading, what students have done in the project work and practical work, how well they perform the practical work. Students are making notes and making observations, and they take into account in the final grading the performance in the practical work, for example. So what is the problem here?
Well, how do you measure creative thinking? Because it's a lot
Creative
easier to
thinking.
do critical
Yeah.
thinking.
Or inquiry, you talked about inquiry
Yeah,
in
inquiry.
science,
Yeah.
so there's a whole set of abilities that really aren't reflected in the kinds of traditional
I
paper
think
and pencil tests.
it is a challenge, especially the creative thinking. It's not appreciated. I'm very much talking about that in teacher education and also in the National Board of Education when we are now making the new curriculum. How we make more stronger impact and more aims supporting the development of creative thinking. But you know, it's a challenge to assess this kind of things. I have no answer how to do it in a proper way. Just teachers are monitoring students in the classroom and taking into account even the attitude somehow. What is your attitude to work, attitude to do science?
But the correlation to the national sampling, which doesn't take those issues into account, right?
No, it's just a cognitive.
Right, so it suggests that, I mean, that's, there may not be that much of
Yeah, but
that.
But you know, the procedural knowledge, it was about how the items in that field, so it was measuring how you interpret the tables, how you interpret the graphs. You need some creativity to recognize some patterns. It's somehow measuring at least a little bit about the creativity, how you recognize, oh, this is the pattern here,
Right.
but not exactly.
Right. So someone else want to pick up on this issue, or you?
And also some open questions that explain shortly how you measure this, or how you investigate this.
Right.
This is the creativity in writing that.
Sam, are you going to pursue this, or you?
Well, related to it, I just, on a technical matter, Tom, Professor Leveman, thank you for the presentation, very informative. To build on the question about sampling, where you have 5 to 10% of a 60,000 person cohort, are you taking 5 to 10% of a cohort in a school? So for example, if you have 60 kids in 3rd or 5th or 7th or 9th grade, you call down just 5 or 10% of that cohort in the school, or are you taking?
The whole population is the 60,000,
Oh, right.
and then we take schools.
Okay.
So the schools, the number of schools, so that we get this 5%.
Okay, so it would be the entire 3rd grade, for example, at a particular school. And you would add up the schools, which in sum would constitute 3,000 to 6,000 students total.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, we have a lot of statistics from Finland about the variation between schools.
Right.
The variation between schools is almost zero in all PISA measurements. So it's not so serious issue to know in detail every time the variation between schools, because it has been recognized to be almost zero in all kind of measurements.
Right, right. I mean, I've seen that table repeatedly, that the between-school variation is so low. But, and you say, I'm looking at the book here on page 76, that is grades 3, 5, 7, and 9, most typically grade 9.
Yeah.
Is there a routine for every year which grades are chosen? Is there a method? Do you have a system for which grades you test?
We are not testing every year. So this science is made 10 years ago, the previous one. So
Okay.
sometimes.
So you haven't done science in 10 years?
Yeah, no. So it's
And what grade was that for?
9.
Just 9th grade?
But in math and mother language, we are testing also other grades, but not in science.
Okay.
It's quite, we are not using money for testing.
I understand.
We are using money for supporting the schools. So it's not our culture. But it is very important to know in some level where we are.
Right.
And there has been discussion that next time we will have science, we should also measure some lower grades.
Right. And your science scores on PISA are the highest.
Yeah.
Distinguished from your reading and your math, and distinguished from everybody else's science scores. So that says a lot. But I haven't checked the source here. It's an OECD publication from 2011 about your sampling.
Yeah.
But I would like to learn more about the other question I have is the significant underperformance of Swedish Finns.
Yeah, that's very serious issue.
Yeah, on page 13 you say PISA 27 points lower in reading, 14 points lower in math, 28 points lower in
And
science.
it comes also out in this national monitoring.
What's the explanation?
So one is the textbooks and learning materials, because they are based on the Finnish curriculum, and there are only one and quite old in science. And in Finnish speaking area there are 3 or even 4 available. Teachers are able to choose. So the lack of Swedish learning material would be one. And maybe there are more unqualified teachers. I think I remember some statistics. There are more unqualified teachers in Swedish speaking area.
Okay.
So, but it's a serious problem and politicians are worried about that. But you know more.
Yeah, maybe, just to comment that this is a very interesting for us since the Swedish-speaking Finns are their economic status and socio-economic status is much higher.
Yeah.
They are like high-level people,
aristocrats.
which are normal explanation, and then you succeed when these kind of things are okay. And success is guaranteed when you have more money or welfare and this kind of things. But this has been a quite intensive discussion in Finland among Swedish-speaking people because they are really quite worried about the situation.
Especially there's lack of Swedish-speaking kindergarten teachers, qualified kindergarten teachers. Maybe you know many important issues in the kindergarten. So and in general there's lack of, in my understanding.
And also primary, because the Finnish-speaking people are living in the capital area and then in the West Coast. And in West Coast there is a department of teachers education, but not in Helsinki. And in the Helsinki area where there are maybe 1/3% of Swedish-speaking population is living. There is a lack of qualified teachers also in primary level, and I think also in secondary level. And that what Auli say that the Swedish-speaking, their economic status is a little bit better in Finland, but there are also big varieties in this economics. Some of them are rich, but not all of them. Right. And it's also there's also social classes among these Swedish
more
speaking.
than in Finns in its
Just for one follow-up, but I was also told at some point, and then maybe this is not true, but that actually there are Finnish-speaking students in Sweden, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Are
immigrants, because after in 1960s we have a very poor situation in Finland, and then 2,000 Finnish people moved to Sweden, and because we have been as a part of Sweden, there have always been Finnish-speaking minority in Sweden.
Right, but someone told me that those students were also performing better than the Swedish students.
Yeah, there are Finnish schools in Stockholm. Yeah,
So
and
that are
most of the
performing
Finns-
better than the other Swedish
Yeah.
schools. But I also heard the same explanation, which was that it was related to, one explanation was related to the textbooks, because they're using the same Finnish textbooks.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This textbook discussion, it's quite interesting. It looks now that it's somehow coming back, the importance of the good textbook. We have had a comparative research between Finland, Germany and Switzerland, and it's a 20 teachers lesson, 20 lessons of 20 teachers have been videotaped, and it has been analyzed carefully. And the Finnish teachers are using for supporting students to use more textbooks. And the textbooks, the structure, the concepts and relation between concepts, they are very well organized in the textbooks. In Switzerland, in Germany, they are not using, they are just giving the kind of papers and doing different kind of things. They are having more hands-on, but students are not learning. So the main difference is the using of textbook.
This is
But
just
speculation.
yeah. Well, to pick up, I mean, so the work that I've done in Norway, and also this is I've heard as well in Denmark. One of the notion of a teacher who relies on the textbook is sort of that is the lazy teacher.
Yeah, that's
right.
Also in Finland. But I mentioned that maybe it's coming back, the importance of kind of structure and how the knowledge.
But even in Finland, the notion of relying on the textbook is not seen as a sign of good teaching.
We are saying that the curriculum is the most important document you have to follow, and you should use versatile materials.
It depends also on subject. There are subjects which are very textbook based, and then there are subjects where teachers use they are only a reference book, and it depends also about the teachers have different views about textbooks.
Right.
Can I add
You want to add to that,
Yeah.
and then we'll go.
It's all, the problem, the lazy teacher problem may be in that the problem is in these textbooks that they copy the whole grade level curriculum. And it means that you have to go through everything. And then what teachers say is that we are always busy because we have so much to do with the textbooks and we can't do anything else like hands-on. So the problem is not the textbook, but the way the teacher uses the textbook. Teachers need to have a kind of possibilities not to use all the contents. But if they are using all the content and do nothing else, then they are in a hurry all the time and they do not have time to plan projects and different kinds of learning possibilities for children.
Are the textbooks created by Finnish educators or by the international publishing companies?
No,
Finnish. And
Yes.
actually, most of us teacher educators, we are the ones who are doing those textbooks.
I have wrote maybe more than 100 textbooks. But it's very common that the publishing houses, they are collecting different kind of people,
Yeah.
different kind of teachers, so that there are no the diversity is important. There are also university teachers. Somehow it was earlier, it was not appreciated, but maybe nowadays it's coming again a little bit more appreciated.
Tanya, just,
You want to follow up? Go
I
ahead.
just want to follow up very quickly. Is it the University of Vasa that is home to the Finnish-Swedish teacher education program?
Yeah, Åbo Academy in Vasa. Vasa is the teacher training.
Okay. Have you studied the difference between students who study education at Vasa and at the 8 Finnish universities? I mean, I've looked at all that data. I've met with the head of admissions at the University of Helsinki for teacher education, and I've seen how difficult it is to get into the 8 different teacher education programs. I have not looked at the numbers for Vasa. My hunch is it's not the same candidate.
Yeah.
And that, in this textbook issue, may be utterly peripheral. It may not have much to do with it. It may not have much to do with it at all.
In this comparison of teacher education in Finland, US, and Norway,
Karen is working on it.
and there's also the Vasa is also in that.
Vasa is in that?
Yes, it's inside. Yeah.
My hunch is there might be a lot there. That you have a different group of students studying education at Vasa than you do at the other universities, and consequently you have a different cohort of teachers in the schools.
I have no data.
Okay. I'm sure the data's there.
That is
It's
an
coming.
interesting point of
What's
view.
that?
It is an interesting point of view.
Lena, I think there's probably a lot there. A lot.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, what struck me earlier is when you said that there's more of a focus on process and product versus just product. And it ties in with your last, on the bottom here, professionalism and assessment versus bureaucracy. Because I think what we struggle with is we are trying to get more at the process, and it can be the creative process, whatever it is, yet we're constantly asked to provide the product that everyone can look at and say, okay, it's working. Because there's not that trust in our belief of whether the process is or isn't working.
The side effects, in all kind of approaches we have the side effects. And for example, this teaching to the test side effect. So how to minimize all kind of harmful side effects? That is maybe the interesting question.
Right. Well, it sounds like from what you were describing that with the process, you know, when the teacher's going around the room and they start to make their own assessments of what's going on and the conceptual understanding, that's where that process piece can be assessed on the teacher level, and everyone will trust their assessment. But that, I think here, is a lot harder for people to accept in our society. That if I as a teacher believe in my professional judgment that this is happening, the person on the street wants to say, well, what's the product or what's the What's the test
So
score?
you mean that the parents in
Yeah,
US
parents in
do
the
not trust
community,
this?
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, it's a huge part of the belief systems here.
Well, just to build on that, and in fact, we were talking with parents about assessments, and a question here is, the questions that you showed on your tests have one answer. And then we're talking about tests now that have no single answer. Non-standard
Yeah.
questions, complex.
Yeah. In a classroom-based assessment, this is kind of ideal, but if you are doing with small money, national monitoring, so it's so many compromises you have to make. And I don't know how many euros they were using for this monitoring, but there were only some people, I and some others, who were making the test. In Germany, if they are doing the test, there are I think 300 people making the one test. Making so many trials and different, but this was a very small budget, so it was not possible to.
So in an ideal world, you would create a test with
Some of my
non-standard
colleagues,
problems,
yes.
open-ended questions that could be
We had
assessed.
also them, yeah.
But then how do you create a way of assessing it so that there is a universal understanding of what you're looking for?
Do you have criterion referenced assessments? Is that is the system fundamentally criterion referenced in each subject area?
In Finland, you mean?
Yeah.
No. So
It's a number? What's the relationship between the reporting and the assessment?
sorry, now I don't get the question.
All right.
But we are not having any guidelines and reference. I was just myself making the framework for national assessment. So this is not done so carefully in Finland. So small scale monitoring. But I have been working in the PISA, and so I personally know quite much about this kind of large scale assessment. But anyway, I am sure that it was not so perfect compared to my colleagues in Germany. So many people are doing. But
Like
I have collaborating with them, and I know also how they are doing that. So.
But for example, on one of the slides earlier, I think it was in science, I think the slide, as I recall, said that you're assessing factual knowledge, conceptual knowledge, procedural knowledge.
Yeah.
And is that something that the teachers have just internalized, that they have some internalized assessment framework as a result of their preparation and work, or their documents that they use as reference points for assessing student work, or how does that work?
So of course the framework is coming from the national framework curriculum. So if you read carefully the curriculum text, the aims, you recognize that there are quite many aims dealing with the procedural knowledge. And quite many aims also dealing with the conceptual knowledge from the point of view of nature of knowledge. So it comes from the aims, but aims as such, it's very difficult to make items. So you need kind of framework. And then after you have framework, it's more easy to make a report. You can report that in the procedural knowledge dimension, this kind of performance was coming out and this was coming out. But we are not having ready this kind of frame. We are not having the description of learning outcomes in detail. So something should be taken into use for designing the test.
So does that assessment report that a student would get, does that include a mark? A grade or a number, or what is the report a narrative?
There are also these percentages. As I saw you, how many students were able to solve this type of questions. These are coming out from the report. So how many students were able to solve this type of problems? How many students were able to solve this type of problems? And then it is also possible to have a look for correlations. So this is the level, what is coming out from the national monitoring.
That's the percentage of right answers?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
How many were able to solve? Most of the students solved in average of the items, yes. In this level it was coming up, and this was reported to teachers.
Okay. I have a
Go ahead.
completely different question, so if somebody wants to pursue this,
No, I think
I'll
that's
wait.
fine, go ahead. Or do you, wait, Sarah, you want to follow up?
So I'm just curious, could you talk a little bit about what you do with these results? Do you use this information to change anything, or is it just to have?
So, the gender differences are serious issues, but in general, the people in the National Board, they were quite happy with the monitoring. This correlation is important also. It gives some information how well teachers are assessing. But we have to go into detail, and the number of, there are also questions about how much is the inquiry orientation is used, how much students are planning the inquiry activities, how much they are able to create their own hypotheses. There were problems in this kind of things. And so it's the kind of whole package. But in general, I think you should be quite happy with this monitoring outcomes.
But it really implies that,
Inside the limitations, it was measuring only this knowledge type. And
but it really implies kind of a, just a complete upside down approach to what we anticipate in the States, which is that we sort of rely on the national level to tell us what's really happening,
Yeah.
right? And we rely on those standardized tests at the end of the year. It's those scores that are going to tell us if kids are really learning, and it's that, you know, everyday assessment that goes on in the classroom that we don't really trust, right? That's, you know, that would yield that kind of information, right? But we don't, we think we have to wait until we get the test score from the testing company, and we complain about how long it takes, you know, them to send it and everything else. But, so it really is a different take. Fernando, are you going to pick up on this, or?
Yes.
Okay, all right, well, so we're going to keep going for a little while, and then we'll bring Bill into the conversation, yeah.
I'm having a hard time. When you have a national monitoring assessment that occurs, in this case, once a decade, right? And one of the findings, for example, is that there is a gender difference in physics and in biology. I guess, you know, someone's very interested in policy. What are the policy implications of that? And 10 years from now, is there just sort of an expectation that the gender gap will reduce, or is there something that comes out of this? And I think that's kind of what you were asking as well.
in my understanding, the gender gap was bigger in previous, but now, for example, nowadays at the Department of Physics, it's coming quite close to female and male students studying physics. And we know also that there are certain contexts that would create the interest towards science better. For example, the context where the physical situations are made in the context of human being, what human being is doing, what's happening inside the human, the health education issues. So we know a lot of this kind of things, how to make physics especially more interesting. And if you are interested, then you are maybe eager to engage in learning. So they have this kind of impact. And now the new curriculum, I think, I guess we have had a discussion that how to implement this kind of ideas in the curriculum, how to make physics so that females are more engaged in physics. But I think it was more worse earlier, and it's coming better. Especially you can see at the Department of Physics. In medical science, there are nowadays even more females.
But I guess my question, where is the impetus to
What
make
is
those?
what is the impetus?
Right.
For example, the contextualization of physics in the way that it becomes equally interesting for boys and girls.
But you just said that 10 years ago the gap was probably bigger, right?
Well, I think
Than now.
I'm not exactly sure, but I think it was bigger.
Okay.
And at that time, there was very small number of females at the physics department typically. Nowadays, it's more balanced. Even in engineering, there are more females in Finland nowadays.
So I guess, I mean, I don't know, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it's kind of saying, did they just say that there are these results and then assume that folks at the university or other places would try and address it? I mean, here, if there was really a gender difference, there might be a commission put together, they might put some funding behind it, they might try and do that, you know, then the reality is nothing, of course, would happen or change, but, you know,
A lot of money would be spent.
a lot of money would be spent, yes, they spend more time, they develop a new test, right? But so I guess the question...
Now I understand the question. No,
Yeah.
it's not the Finnish way. One characteristic of the education policy is the stability. So we are doing slow progress. In education, it's not possible to have changes all the time. Otherwise, it's not working. Teachers are not able to follow the changes. So it's a very slow 10, 20 years periods that you are able to make a change. You have to be patient and go forward.
We have 1 year or 1 semester changes.
Yes, but everybody knows that it's not.
And then they change when the scores come in and they say that didn't work, so we're going to move to this approach.
That we tried 3 years ago for 5 minutes. But I think really actually looking at over a period of 10 years, it's sort of the, you know, were there any things related to physics and biology that actually changed or that could be related to that would be fascinating to look at.
I'm not able to say that, but what I am able to say, I remember that there was so-called Ankron questions, which were similar in the previous one and this one. But there was not so few that we were not able to make any crash modeling or things like that. But just the feeling based on the comparison of the percentages that the level was a little bit going down. But on the other hand, there was a curriculum change and the items were not measuring exactly what is the aim now.
Right.
So it's very difficult to say what is the change in general because it's 10-year period is quite long.
Right.
And the one curriculum change between the measuring.
Right.
So this is it was not reported so strongly that this is the level is going down because it's not easy to say.
Yeah. Bill, you want to?
So this is a sort of a different direction with these questions, but I was thinking about this and so I don't know how all of this happens sort of historically, but it seems like Finland was doing relatively well to the rest of the world compared to the rest of the world. Not that the comparison is fair or necessarily important to the people in Finland, and that it was discovered that people as a country, you're doing pretty well. And I was wondering a couple things. One is, has the attention changed the way that people think about education, sort of the policymakers or decision makers? For example, all this attention to assessment, it's exactly the opposite of what's promoted by the international financial institutions and the international educational organizations that are completely focused on outputs and testing really to the detriment of the experiences of adults and children in school that you don't have. So sort of one concern I would have, not being from Finland, although my family, half my family is from Finland, is what impact all of this attention is going to have on us because we're doing well compared to everybody. Does it change? And secondly, so what are the issues that you're concerned about, like, that has captured the attention of people that, if you think about improvement, what are you focusing on? And how did you get there?
So in general level, first the ICT, use of ICT in education, the kind of competencies you need in the future working life, and ICT is one example. So I think we are worried about this kind of things. That are we educating students to 21st century? And this creativity that was already mentioned. I have personally not now, but earlier, some 10 years ago, I was more interested about creativity in problem solving and in science, and was researching and publishing in that field, and was really interested about how to increase this kind of activities. And because I think that in a working life and everyday life, you need more creativity. So that is something that I am the most worried about, how to implement this kind of activities. I think in the Finnish education, because we are not having this heavy testing, it must be quite easy, because teachers are not worried about the test outcomes. So it should be easy to implement this kind of new things. Maybe collaboration is also something that is still a challenge. So these kind of very general issues, I think, are the challenges. Creativity, use of ICT. This is my opinion. Please, the first question, it was a long question, so.
All the attention to assessment has changed the thinking of practitioners about assessment.
So I think that it has been quite stable situation. So it's not so dramatical changes in assessment. Maybe we are more emphasizing formative and informal nowadays than earlier. But maybe some colleagues could answer also what are the challenges and how you see the assessment.
We have had a change in approach from this quantitative to qualitative. I think that we usually use some kind of self-assessment and also portfolios, diaries, that kind of things in school as a part of assessment and evaluation.
But we have not followed Sweden. In Sweden they are not grading, they are just very soft type of grading. We have not followed, we have still this kind of grading culture. The grades are some level important, but not in the beginning of primary level. So maybe it's becoming more and more important in the lower secondary, grade 7 to 9.
So is it also true, in Norway there are no grades, no written marks up until lower secondary, that's also true in Finland?
And Swedish are not anymore happy. They have followed our, to find a balance with that, so the grades are somehow useful for.
And I think schools and teachers, they can choose if they want to give grades.
At least in primary level.
In primary, let's say this 5th or 6th grades, they can give grades. And actually what I have heard is that the students really want to get those grades. It's important for them. We actually had a project where students, there was a research case, students were, they had a curriculum-based project studying Africa. And in this project, part of the things they did, they also designed and planned students by themselves, the test that was in the end of the project. And the test was actually very good when they had a small part where they could do the test issues. So it was very interesting to see how they saw this kind of a possibility to test themselves and others.
Interesting. Well, you want to present Solana?
Yes, I have a question. No, I was wondering because before everyone was talking about the importance of textbooks, and I imagine that being like more static.
Yeah.
And this type of things like empowering kids and or facilitating kids to do their own testing. Yeah. That's like on the other side of freedom. And so how do you work with teachers? I know you have all this teacher preparation beforehand, but how do you continue to work with teachers in that kind of activities for them to be capable to empower the kids to do stuff like that?
Yeah, that's very important. It's very important. We have had in our research project, we have a new, totally new aspect to that. We think that teachers do not need to know actually everything. So teachers need to have partners in their pedagogy, like pedagogical agents, who are also teachers, but they are between teachers and students. And they have the access and the knowledge about virtual environments, and teachers don't do things if they have to do everything themselves. And that's one thing we have been doing, but it's just a small research case. But let's see if we can do that in nationwide. Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would just like to go back to a question about the very last slide you had up there, where you were comparing the model of inputs versus outputs. And you said that Finland really looks
This
at,
one.
yeah, under collaboration, equal opportunities for all learners, supportive assessment, and then in the other model, less of similar assessments for all. So my
Yeah,
question.
that's in student level, yeah. In student level, the encouraging assessment that it is not possible to have the same test or same way of assess, so it's a more personalized assessment because of the diversity in the classroom.
Oh, so you, earlier you had said that you don't necessarily, that you don't really have levels. So you must, I guess you differentiate the instruction in the classroom, and then you
Yes,
also,
in the classroom you have to differentiate.
right, and you also differentiate the assessment, so kids get different levels of assessment?
I think it doesn't work if you are differentiating everything. It doesn't work well. So there must be variation and encouraging students.
Mm-hmm.
But it is very strong, my opinion. Or what is the Lena? Is it fair to have differentiation in assessment? Because you have in the classroom, in the Finnish classroom, almost 10% of the students have been recognized to have difficulties in learning. And they have the recognition done by the psychologists or things. And so they have real difficulties. And in every classroom there's about 4 students, this kind of special needs. And still they are in the same classroom. They have a different type of textbooks even, they have a different type of assignment. In the group activities they are collaborating with others. But how to make fair if they are using exactly the same type of assessment for them? They feel that they are not able to do anything then. So how do you interpret?
I think it's absolutely very important to have this kind of a system, because we very often, if there are those special need kids, it's important for them to see that they learn compared to what they knew before. And that's the process that we encourage. So you can learn and you learn. And it's not the comparative aspect of the assessment. And I have been doing also textbooks, these ABC books for first and second graders to learn to read and write. We had these assessment tests in those teacher books too. And we used there also this model that we had different kinds of levels for testing. So you can choose an advanced, or you can choose something different kind of a test to different persons.
And does that continue through upper secondary school, the differentiation in teaching and testing through upper secondary?
Yes, but of course it will be kind of in the beginning we think that we are not in the primary, in the beginning we are not teaching the subject, we are instructing the children, the child. We are teaching the child, and the subject is just
Tool.
It's just a tool for the child to learn to study and learn to learn. And of course this tool element of the subject decreases when children get older. So the importance of the subject itself becomes more important.
So it's a very complex issue, how to make balance between those
Right.
two.
But
But
it's,
child is in the focus, the well-being of the child.
right, and I think in this country, we almost have, at least at this point, we argue that it's not fair if children are getting different assessments, in some sense. That's sort of the implication of the policy today. That's why it's mandated that everyone has to take the tests.
That's how
And-
people understand
Same.
standards-based education.
And that's the notion of teacher, in order to evaluate all of our teachers, the notion is that everybody has to be evaluated on what measures that we could consider comparable. And so I think what, in part you really see is just a fundamentally different set of beliefs around, and I think it just goes to the word. I mean, people really don't use the word assessment, it's really about testing. And this is really about assessment, which is, and they are not the same thing.
They are not the same.
And so, I think when some of us around the room would look at, I mean, this is exactly what we're trying to argue and trying to make the case. The challenge is to do it in a context where people really think that you have to have similar assessments for all, right? Because of the psychological and the psychometric properties and everything else that are
All the
underneath it.
money is on the right-hand side.
Yes,
of
that's
the screen.
exactly right. That's right. If this was Vegas, all the money would be on, black,
it's
right?
the wrong side.
Yeah.
What do you mean by fair? Because we think it's fair that there is a differentiation and we take the children as they are, and we know that they are different. So we think it's fair. For you, the fair thing is something else.
Well, first, again, I don't want to speak for everybody, but this is a diverse country. There are many different viewpoints on this, but we can look at equity from a number of different perspectives.
Yeah.
But at least from a policy perspective, fairness has been defined for the moment in terms of comparability and treating everyone the same. And there are some good reasons for that, which include the fact that we haven't held all students to the same, or expected that all students could reach the same high level of standards. And so for us here, the tracking and the ability grouping, which you could argue is a means of providing differentiated education, has not resulted in a more equitable outcomes for students, and you could say has in some ways reinforced the inequitable outcomes. So I think
Right, so there's an underlying belief of access to free public education in the country, but there's the recent trend of testing, which started under No Child Left Behind, had this premise that all students, even that 10% of special education students, are tested the same way that everybody else is tested, because that's supposedly fair. You're making it fair for them, even though I bet you the majority of educators, particularly the teachers in the front lines, it drives them insane when they have a student who they know up front is not going to perform well on that test, yet they're forced to give them that test. And that measure of assessment, there were going to be these huge penalties kicking in that now there's waivers all over the place because everybody recognized that it was a joke. But yet, it's not really going away because teacher evaluations are still going to be tied into these assessments. So.
But you are not discussing about this self-efficacy, because if you are all the time punishing and putting the student down, he or she never learn anything. But if you are encouraging and supporting, then it creates the positive feelings and develop the self-efficacy, and then the student is able to learn, and it's a very positive circle.
We'll send that video down.
I know, exactly. This is why we keep inviting you over to say that.
Because the Bandura is the US person, and I think he has brought a lot of this kind of things, the Bandura's theory of self-efficacy, and well, how he describes the optimal classroom situation. We have taken that situation to Finnish classrooms. How I think he, Bandura. How he describes the optimal situation, which kind of circumstances in the classroom support the development of self-efficacy. or self-picture or whatever.
Right, but so part of the challenge here is these concerns are rooted in reality, in the sense that before we had these expectations that everyone would take the test, you had schools and places where students would not take these tests. They would be put in separate places. They would be left out of the curriculum, right? They wouldn't get this kind of experience. And there are also arguments that, and what happened was when we embraced notions of self-efficacy and self-esteem, that we did that to too large an extent, and we failed to pay attention to their academic performance. So then we're celebrating, everything is a celebration, everything anybody does, you don't want to punish anybody, you want to support everyone, but then there wasn't seeing any commensurate improvement in academics. So part of the challenge is trying to figure out this balance. But I really do, one of the things I'd love to pursue further is sort of how these notions of related to testing and assessment, how they're embedded within our different cultures and our societies. We talked earlier this morning about the importance of understanding context. And the broader context. And I think part of the context are these values and beliefs related to sorting and testing and fairness and assessment that are fundamentally different in these two countries. But what may be similar is we both may try to use and think about how do we use assessment as a lever to change from wherever we are. So that's where our research is focused a lot on. I think Bill and his colleagues at the Center for Policy Research and Education have looked at the implementation, the development of new standards. I mean, so NCLB in some ways arose out of the failures of a project which was designed to develop alternatives to standardized tests. We felt like these tests could drive the curriculum in more positive and productive directions, but it was so complicated to develop those assessments and tests that in fact we didn't get them. But at the same time we built this accountability culture where people now wanted the test to test those outcomes, and the only tests we have, unfortunately, are the lousy ones, or the only cheap ones we have are the lousy ones that get used. And so the question is, how do we use assessment as a lever to change? How would Finland use assessment as a lever to change if the traditional curriculum is not going to continue to serve the society in the way that it has in the past, if it's not going to continue to track along PISA? I mean, that's one of the issues that may happen as PISA evolves and develops more problem solving and emphasizes creativity as much. Is Finland going to continue to excel in that arena?
Next PISA will have this collaborative problem solving. How students are solving problems together. That will be the next.
And is there any discussion in Finland of how Finland might do on that kind of assessment?
I have discussed with some people, but no strong feelings about that. So
I think
we will
we
see.
are good on that nowadays, because students work very often in classrooms. We do not have, in the traditional classroom like this one, students normally sit in groups. They are not sitting in rows and like that. So they do quite much work together. Group work is one of the basic methods in our schools. So I think we have possibilities to get back to the
Right. It'll be interesting to see. Well, I want to take this opportunity to thank all of our guests from this morning as well as this afternoon. This has really been a fascinating look into some very complicated issues that I don't think we usually get to hear kind of the surface level descriptions of what's going on in Finland, so I really appreciate the chance to kind of get a little bit beneath the surface and hopefully to start some conversations that we can continue in a number of different venues. But thank you all very much.
Thank you.